a mental health or illness condition, please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm Sean in the studio. This is a show about what matters most in our life: our mind, our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. In this show, I will share a bit of loss, about loss and death. I will bring you a research about how smartphones can predict brain function associated with anxiety and depression. And then I will speak to Dr. Paria Hassouri. She's the author of Found in Transition. We will talk about her experience with her transition of her transgender daughter. So let's talk about the tip of the week. Today, I like to talk about many concepts that are around loss and death. You know, last week, there were a couple of major dates that have affected me. So I never forgot my shock and then horror, fear, and utter level of sadness and grief that I experienced 19 years ago on September 11th as I watched the planes go through the Twin Towers. I remember watching the reruns of the attacks all day and feeling traumatized over and over again. A sense of safety crashed forever. The horror of waiting for more to come and the paranoia of who's done it and when will it be done again creeped in. This was a people-to-people attack, so there was a sense of anger and blame that creeped in toward human beings. I remember, although I had quit cigarettes for 5 years, that day I decided to smoke as if it was okay to self-destruct, since human beings were going to destroy themselves anyway. Obviously, that irrational thinking was short-lived. Thank God. So what was the difference for me between September 11, 2001, with the January 14th, 1994, which, if any of you remember, the earthquake which devastated Northridge, California? The San Fernando Valley looked like a war zone with so much destruction. I felt fear, utter powerlessness, and holding on until it was all over. Then the aftershock kept coming, which created more horror. Yet it appeared that it would be finally over and that the destructions were done already and it was time to recreate and rebuild. This was a non-personal nature, realignment, and although there was frustration about the inconvenience and the destruction, there was no blame. So our world became about helping and building. We have this experience right now with all the fires that are going on and all the natural disasters around the U.S., whether in California with our fires, which we are experiencing and feeling all day in the air, and the Oregon and all the states that have that. Also with people who they've lost someone due to the COVID-19, people are going through the loss. Some of it very non-personal, but if we know that there was a human that caused it or a scenario that caused it, then we create anger and have someone to blame. And last Thursday was also the Suicide Prevention Day. According to the World Health Organization, every 40 seconds someone in the world takes their own life, which means 800,000 people a year. The rate of suicide in the world has risen 35%, and it has risen at the time of the pandemic. So what does a person need to think and feel like to want to take their own life? As I have worked with many suicidal clients for the past 30 years, utter feeling of hopelessness and helplessness, a sense of resignation about their own abilities or thinking that any ability would really not matter, a sense of loss or meaning or purpose. How each person would get to this point varies. So whether a person's life is threatened by another human being, act of nature, accident, losing someone close to death, or one chooses to end their own life, everyone experiences facing death throughout their life. There's an existential anxiety and a dread that comes with facing one's own mortality. The meaning of life and the purpose gets re-examined. Values get reprioritized. Attention goes inward and then focuses on what really matters to that person. Mostly, what is left can become precious or lose all meaning. How do you handle the thought of death or facing death? How would you prioritize differently if you were facing death? What values would you uphold and commit to if you were facing death? Now act on the values that you prioritize and live every moment of your life as if it could be your last. I'll be right back with the latest research.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, The Awareness Path to Create the Life You Want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490am.com.
Latest research. Information on social activity, screen time, and location from smartphones can predict connectivity between regions of the brain that are responsible for emotion, according to a study from Dartmouth College. In this research, data from phone usage was analyzed alongside results from functional MRI scans to confirm that passively collected information can mirror activity in the brain linked to traits such as anxiety. Wow. Predictions based solely on the phone data matched the brain scans with 80% accuracy. And you just thought you were using your phone and that's all you were doing. Simple information about how someone is using their smartphone can provide a peek into the complex functioning of the human brain. Although this research is just beginning, combining data from smartphone rather than functional MRI alone will hopefully accelerate the research to understand better how the human brain works. According to the research, how often and how long an individual uses their phone provides information about the functioning between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, two key centers of the brain related to emotional state. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex is responsible for self-control, decision-making, and risk evaluation. The amygdala triggers the fight or flight response and helps individuals determine the emotions of others. In addition to data on social activity, screen time and location information on exercise and sleep patterns were also collected for the study. The research found that the more screen time, regular exercise, earlier bedtimes, higher social interaction, and certain location patterns passively inferred from phone data matched the state of higher functional connectivity between the brain regions. This increased activity indicates a more positive emotional state. The research result aligned with clinical evidence showing that stronger connectivity between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala to be associated with lower levels of anxiety and depression. Weaker functional connectivity, on the other hand, represents a more negative emotional state. Anonymous functional MRI data from volunteer participants were placed into two categories, divided by low and high brain connectivity levels. By matching phone data against the functional MRI results, the researchers were able to predict which research subjects had higher or lower connectivity between brain regions with 80% accuracy. According to the research team, the use of passive information from a smartphone can help eliminate the subjectivity that often complicates other informational gathering techniques on emotional well-being, such as personal interviews and self-reporting on questionnaires. The phone information allowed researchers to predict the emotional state of individuals at any given time without intrusive data collection. The data also supports predictions of the long-term emotional traits in individuals. Hopefully, this study shows how mobile sensing can provide deep longitudinal human behavioral data to complement brain scans. This could offer a new insight into the emotional well being of subjects that would just not be possible with continuous sensing. I think that's probably will also help a lot of the apps that are coming for anxieties and depression and working with you probably through your phone or through the data that comes through your watches, phone watches, and all of that to help you regulate your emotion. We'll be right back with Dr. Paria Hassouri.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, The Awareness Path to Create the Life You Want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490am.com.
Have you ever wished you could just wake up one day, reach across your nightstand, and hit the life reset button? Let's face it, the struggles and frustrations of everyday life leave millions of women and men around the globe yearning for a new way. And the new way is right here in Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine. You can get it now at Foojan.com or Amazon.com. Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want. You deserve it.
Take KMET 1490 AM with you everywhere you go by downloading our free smartphone apps found on the KMET website, KMET1490am.com. You can also go to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store on your phone to download the free app. Now you can listen live or play any of your favorite programmers' podcasts using your smartphone. Don't miss out on the free KMET smartphone apps. Go to KMET1490am.com and download your free phone app today.
Hello, listeners. This is Christopher from The Christopher Show. Hey, if you missed one of our shows here at KMET, don't worry about it. You can go to our webpage, and that's KMET1490am.com. Go to the homepage, click on the SoundCloud tab, and hear any show anytime you want.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I am so excited to be with Dr. Paria Hassouri. She's the author of Found in Transition. She's a pediatrician, mother of 3, and transgender rights activist, and her essays have been published in Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, Huffington Post, and Women's Running Magazine. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
I love your book. It's beautifully written. So for everyone, please get this. Whether you think that you're going through yourself in a beautiful family of transitioning from one gender to another, or to educate yourself, I think it's a great book. So tell us about your experience and why did you write the book? So because there's an experience of a mother, there's an experience that you go through as a family. There's also another experience that I want to share this with the world.
Yeah. So I think, so I have three children, and in 2017, my middle child, at this age of 13, came out as transgender at 13 and a half. So she was born assigned male, and at 13 and a half, she told us, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. And my husband and I were completely blindsided by this when she told us. So we didn't think that she had any signs of being transgender when she was younger. So she wasn't a boy who wanted to wear dresses or, play with dolls or grow out her hair or, do any of the things one typically associates with transgender kids based on what they see in the media. And so when she came out at 13 and a half, we were sort of completely blindsided, didn't know what to do, and thought that this was actually just a teenage confusion thing that she was going through, and that it wasn't real. And so we, unfortunately, we had, I went through this phase of initially being really angry because I thought she's trying to get my attention in this extreme way, and I don't have time for this. I'm a busy working mom of three, and I've you're dealing with all the stuff that comes up as you're raising children, and here's a big whammy of a thing that she just slammed me with, and I don't think there's even a 1% chance that this is real, and I don't have time to deal with it. And so my initial reaction was, unfortunately, anger and denial. And then, as she persisted in saying this, and, months passed, I went through grief and, realized that it was a real thing. And then, we started getting her the appropriate care. So the reason I decided to write this book is that when I was going through this process, I couldn't really find stories similar to ours. There's at that time, lots of books written by trans people, but a lot of those books were written by trans people who had signs of being trans in early childhood at 3, 4, or 5. And I, as a parent, needed to read a parent experience at that time, not the experience of the trans individual themselves. And all the books I found written by parents were at that time also about kids who were presenting younger. And so I wasn't really finding these stories of kids who are presenting after they start puberty or in young adulthood. But I later came to realize that up to 50% or more of trans people don't have signs in early childhood and do present later, and their stories really, aren't out there. And so I just felt like this was the book that I needed to read when I was going through the process, and it wasn't out there. And since, I was already writing some, it seemed like this was the sort of best place to focus my writing energy into at that time.
Absolutely. I've had the experience of working with a transgender who was born a male, and I met him. And when I met him, he was still a male, and in his 40s. And he knew that he told me that he knew even when he was 5 years old too. But he came from a military family background, and he was very afraid to ever talk about this. So what he did was he actually got married, and then in the marriage he would cross-dress. And so he got first used to cross-dressing, and his wife thought, okay, well, he's cross-dressing. And they all was okay with it for a while, and then it was like, no, this isn't me. I'm not a cross-dresser. I need to actually be who I am. So a lot of our work was for him to come to terms with who he was before he could even try to share it with his first sister and then mom. And I remember the time that he was going to tell his father, and he bought a gun because he thought that his father was going to come from Texas and kill him. And he was so afraid through this process. And, but he did. And he went through complete hormonal shift, and then he went through the um, surgeries.
Mhm.
And it was a beautiful concept of him learning how to be a female, because you know you are another gender inside, but when you are trying to do this at a later time, you've gotten used to culturally being one gender, wearing the same outfit and attending to the world in a whole different way. And he was in engineering in NASA, and he was like, now I need to go back, be a female in the same location. And he did, like, he transitioned within the same company.
Mhm.
And the way that people were treating each other was it was so different for him, which at that point where he became her. And he, at one day, he just went in as a woman, and he saw how the world was uh, relating to her in such a different way. So you're right that some people know it from early on, and if they have a family that they can even talk about it, which your family still had the safety for her to be able to talk about it. In some families, people don't have the safety at all to be able to do that, and then confusion stays with them throughout their puberty and young adulthood, which they're trying to do what the norm is with the body that they were actually born with. So I want to commend you that your family felt safe enough for her to be able to say this. And yes, the denial, the anger, the confusion for parents are such a normal stage to go through. Was it different for you and your husband, or was it a similar experience?
I think my husband was more open, and he actually had an easier time with it. My husband at that time, he has some transgender clients in his work, so he had sort of some more direct exposure than I did, and he had recently, right when our daughter came out to us, had a client who was a young adult, and had come out to his parents as a young adult, and the parents had, like us, sort of said there were no signs before, and that they hadn't known at all. And so sort of that one particular family was in his mind. And so when she told us, he was a lot more like, okay, I think we need to listen to this and explore this, and see what she's telling us. Whereas my immediate reaction was much more like, I don't think this is possible. I think this is just a sort of phase that she's going through. So he just handled it better than I did. He didn't go through as much of, like, if I went through anger and denial on a scale of 9 or 10, he went through it on a scale of 5, maybe, and just in general handled the whole thing better. But interestingly, I found that there were times when I was doing better, and that when I was doing better, he would fall apart a little bit, and it was almost like we would pass back and forth the baton of who gets to fall apart a little bit, and who gets to, it's like we can't both fall apart at the same time. So one of us has to be a little stronger. So majority of the time, I was the one falling apart. But when I'd have like moments where I would, find my strength, he would fall apart a little bit, and then, we kind of, reverse back. But overall, he handled it much better than I did.
I worked
and I
with,
think,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think part of that is because I think as a mother, my identity is so tied into being someone who knows her children, more than his identity is, tied into, sort of how much he knows his children, or this vision he has for his children, or, it's not as, I think parenthood is not as big a part of his identity, as, like for me, 90% of my identity is mother, and 10% is, wife, sister, doctor, friend, and for him, I don't know what percent is, of his identity is parent, but it's not 90%. So, yeah.
I worked with a 13-year-old who was born actually a female, and saw herself as a male. So she at that point came out to her parents stating that I'm a boy and I want to from here on wear the boys' clothes. And I want to go. And she got wraps to put on her breasts because her breasts were growing, and she wanted to do hormone changes. And similar to your experience, her mother was also a physician. Her father was a businessman, and he had the ability of more of not even, it wasn't about accepting what it was more of just being there for his daughter, whatever it was. Although for him, it was not like he was in denial, but it was more like, okay, I'll play the game. It was really that, like, this isn't it, but I'll play the game. For her, it was devastating. I remember her coming to my office like month after month of just bawling and saying, I can't handle this. This isn't it. I will just declare that she's not my child. That was, and she would bawl, and she says, I can't handle this. Like, what did I do wrong? This isn't, she would go into that place of, it's my fault, but I didn't do anything. She was never a male. She was always Fifi female. She's still a Fifi female. There's no way that that's accurate. At one point she was possessed. I mean, it was like she would come up with different versions of things in order to just deny this. And finally, it took almost a couple of years before she would say it's okay. Her father allowed her to start wearing boys' clothes, but not still do anything like a hormonal therapy at all. So the concept happened that he requested to have a name change. And to be known as the new name and wear the boys' clothes and be addressed as a male from there on, at school, with his friends, and with everyone. And mom slowly but surely started playing the game, but internally she would still tell me, I know, it's all a lie. I'm going to wake up one day and it's not going to be there again. Can you relate to that at all?
Well, I think, I didn't have, my sort of period of denial and grief was about 6 months, not, so maybe 6 to 9 months at the most. So I think I didn't have as long of a period of that. But I think, it is very hard for parents. And when their child, comes out with something, like this to them, and this was just sort of not what they envisioned or imagined for their child at all. And I think a lot of why it's hard for parents is that they have a lot of fear about what their child's future will hold if their child, transitions, or, what being transgender means, and have a lot of fear for their children's future and potential and safety. And I think that's why it's, really important that we are, those of us who feel comfortable, being open, because, not everybody has to be, open or, or share their, journey, or experience. But I think for those of us who are comfortable to share our positive stories of, our children that we, allow to be who they truly are, and that they can have, just as much of a bright future as any other child who is supported, in who they are. Because I think the more examples of positive trans children, teens, and young adults, and adults we have in the media and surrounding us, whether through writing, through TVs, through just seeing families that are out, then the less we have fear about what if I have a trans child, and we have less of that reaction that she did and I did, because a lot of my reaction was fear-based, and that that fear-based reaction is a legitimate reaction, but it's important to sort of recognize it and to hopefully move on from it sooner and not stay stuck in it for a year or 2 years, because especially when we're staying stuck in it for that long of a time, for young teens whose bodies is changing rapidly, that's a really distressing time for them when their body is, you mentioned, this child, he was binding his chest, because of the discomfort. So, if his parents had, were able to get him care, sooner, his puberty could have been, blocked, and that could have led to less, breast growth, development, and been less distressing. So, while us as parents are in our denial and fear and inaction phase, the bodies of these kids, particularly in early adolescence, is rapidly changing in a way that's really uncomfortable for them. So that's really, kind of part of the reason to, share our story, be a positive, example, let people know that you absolutely can support your child through transition and get to see them in a different way, and that they can have as good, if not better, of a life, because they're actually going to be living as their true selves, than they, would if you sort of didn't support them in their transition.
Paria, there has been a controversial conversation about whether hormonal therapy is best to be given right when someone acknowledges and is aware and want to go through the transition, and others state that it's better for the hormonal therapy, for the body to go through whatever it's supposed to go through naturally as it was, and then after the body goes through its own transition, then to go through a hormonal shift. With your experience and research that you have done through this time, what are your thoughts about that?
I think these are really good, complicated questions. I would say for any parent who's dealing with this, if they have a child who's around puberty age or just the start of puberty, this is sort of a critical time. And so one step that can be done in between is that you can use a hormone blocker or puberty blocker, where you just put a pause on the body changing. So you're not giving the opposite hormone to make them, develop into characteristics, that are more aligned with their gender identity. You're just putting a pause, and you can put a minimum of a 1 to 2 year pause on puberty development completely safely, and it's completely reversible, while you figure, kind of are, working with the appropriate, therapist and physician to help your child, figure this out. So I think it is a complicated question, but I would say that overall, in my experience, if you're with the right physician and the right therapist, they can really help guide you in this. And my general experience is that it's better to block puberty earlier, and then to, if appropriate, do cross hormones at an appropriate age, which depending on the physician could be anywhere from 14 to 16, rather than letting their body, so for somebody born with male genitals completely masculinized, and then trying to undo all of that, you know, in their 20s. So there's a big difference. If you have a child who's born male and right when their body starts puberty, you block their puberty, and then several years later you start estrogen therapy, they will not develop secondary masculine, you know, features. They won't get an apple's Adam. They won't get facial hair. They won't get that masculine body, you know, habitus. And if that's truly who they are, that generally, you know, looking more, you know, looking like a cisgender female is going to be much easier for them, and, you know, and vice versa, you know, for the opposite. So my general answer would be, overall, if you're with the right doctor and the right therapist, it is better to stop puberty earlier and then do cross hormones, you know, at the appropriate time.
One more controversial conversation that shows up a lot, which is because of the activist and allowing junior high time kind of be a time where kids are getting educated about not only sex education, but also gender identity education. So part of the controversial conversation that I hear from people is, oh, it's just because this is a conversation that is coming up in the school and kids are just experimenting and they just want to see what it is. And, you know, because they want to see what it is and they want to belong to this group and want to be different. And that's how they're coming up with, oh, you know, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm trans, I'm, you know, fluid, and coming up with all of these kind of labels on themselves. And it's more of just wanting to, they heard something, it's unique, they want to be different. You know, it's almost like the same as they just want to be goth, or they want, you know, be emo, or they want to do this. Yeah. And,
yeah,
you know, so that's also a controversial conversation that I hear from parents, where they demonstrate in front of the schools when there's going to be a group and an educational and a class about this, and they're having a strong reaction to this. What are your thoughts?
Well, 100% nobody can make a cisgender person trans, or trans person, you know, gender person, you know, cis. So it's definitely, you know, I think more kids and young, you know, adults who have been struggling with their gender identity in the closet are coming out. And so maybe that gives people the perception that suddenly it's everywhere, when that's, you know, not the case. It's just that, you know, a lot of it has been closeted. There's definitely a difference between experimenting with gender expression. Oh, I want to cut my hair, I want to wear different clothes, I want to do this, and going through medical transition, which requires many, you know, blood tests, appointments, you know, therapies, treatments. And any kid who's doing this for like a phase as a goth, you know, may do some experimentation with how they express their gender, but they are not going to go through all the you know, necessary medical testing and appointments that are needed for considering stopping or pausing puberty or gender, you know, the transition, if this is just a phase thing. And phases usually last a few months, you know, or 6 months. So if you have a 3-month goth phase, or a 6-month goth phase, or, you know, a 6-month phase where you decide to experiment with your hair and makeup and your clothes and how you express yourself, and you're not doing anything medical, like, who cares? You know, we really need to not make this, you know, such a big deal. But so I assure you that teens may maybe want to experiment with how they express their gender a little bit, but they are not going to go through medical transition, if, you know, and what that entails if they're not truly, you know, a transgender. And no, physician would, jump to, put them, do that and, put them. So allow them to just express and experiment with who they are and figure out who they are. And that, is okay. The other thing I would say is, for parents who are resistant about their kids getting educated about, sex and gender and the difference, well, then start reading and educating your children yourself, starting from when they're very young. If you don't want your kids, it doesn't, even if the school doesn't teach them anything, they're going to learn all of this on their own. So it's either the school teaching them or them learning on their own, or you becoming educated as their parent and educating them starting when they're younger and having these conversations starting when they're younger.
I totally agree with you. I have never seen 30 years of being a therapist and working with LGBT, everyone. I've never experienced anyone who just based on peer pressure or wanting to be different, that they held on to an identity or a gender or, as you said, like medical shifts and transitions just because it was truly that they were experimenting. People are confused. I mean, teens get confused with identity, not just even gender identity, with all identities, because that's the phase they got to go through. So if that is also a great question that they have with themselves, then that's the phase that they're going to have that question. But they will answer it. It's not like they will stay in the confusion. They will answer it for themselves. And I definitely agree with that. And I do agree with parents to get educated, because if their children are getting access to a lot of information, it's only right for the parents also not only to have those information, but also learn about whatever it is that they need to learn about, so they can have the influence if they're only afraid that other people are going to have the influence. But you have to have the influence based on facts and data and what's real, versus just because I like to or I don't like to influence your children when something is not real.
Right.
I've worked with a lot of people who faked being straight for many years.
Right.
But I've never known anybody who faked being transgender or gay or lesbian. Never met anyone who faked that. So I totally agree with you. Paria, this question comes up for me. What process did you go through to finally accept? Because yes, you talked about your anger phase and sadness phase and confusion and fear. What brought you into an acceptance finally?
Well, I mean, there was a point where my daughter's emotional state continued to deteriorate. And so, I really, I, at one point she had, when we first found out, she was doing a little bit of self-harming. And then, 6 months later, after we had been trying to, switching her therapist and still in denial, she was starting to have more depression and some suicidal thoughts again. And, it was just like, okay, how long are you going to, be in denial and keep your head in the gutter versus, getting her it's clear that this child in front of you needs help and support, from the right person, and you're not handling it right, and at the bottom of the, at the end of the day, she's, my child, and you can't, watch your child emotionally deteriorate and then get scared about her safety and not do anything about it. And so when I finally got to that point, I got involved with a support group in Los Angeles for families of transgender children and young adults. And that support group was really instrumental in helping me talk to other parents who were going through this experience, the same experience that I was, and I mean, that was really, really what changed things around for me, was sort of that support group, and then getting Ava in with the right therapist who could kind of help me see what was going on. And, I think one of the big mistakes parents make, and I have made all these mistakes that I talk about, is taking their child to a therapist who doesn't specialize in this. I mean, you really need the right, therapist and the right network around you.
Well, I know that a lot of parents take their children to a therapist which matches their own comfort zone and their belief systems versus someone who's very much specialized in that. And sometimes the family therapists work in the bigger picture, but it always at times also works for the child to have their own therapist who's a specialist, and then have a family therapist, which is works with the bigger picture also. Because I've seen the other side of it also, which the parents have been left with their space, thinking they're bad and wrong and nothing they say matters, when they've gone to the therapist, which has a lot of experience in the transgender, because sometimes they only see one angle also, and they work through it that this is the way it is. So the parents just accept it, and that's just the way it is. But to go through the process of acceptance, it's also important for the parents to be able to go, to have the validity of the process that they're going through, as much as the teen is having the validity of the process that they're going through also. How is your relationship evolving with your daughter as she was going through this and as you were going through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now our relationship is stronger and better than it's ever been. When she was a child, living as sort of as a boy, a lot of times she was depressed and had a hard time making friends, and we couldn't really figure out why she was depressed, and she couldn't really figure out why she was depressed. And really, once we started supporting her, she just blossomed. So she is doing incredibly well in school. She's doing incredibly well socially. She's a senior in high school. She's applying to colleges and universities across the US. We're closer than we've ever been. I think as a family, this experience actually made us a lot stronger. So we're doing, honestly, we're doing great. So. Yeah.
Beautiful. I had also the experience of with the family that I worked with the siblings, since it happened much later, where they had their brother for so long, and then suddenly they had a sister added to their family. It was also a huge transitional time for them. But since your children were all younger, how was this transition for the siblings?
Yeah, they were great. So when this was all happening, my oldest was a senior in high school, and then I had one my youngest was maybe in 6th or 7th grade when this was happening. So I had a tween and a almost college age, and they were both very accepting. I mean, for them, it was really not an issue. I find today's youth, it's really a non-issue. They accept people as they are. They're open and loving, and they don't put people in boxes. I think just look at people as humans that evolve and love and accept that. So they I actually thought when Ava was more sort of presenting as a boy, she was always very close to her older brother. So I was always worried that, and they were very, very close, and I worried that now that they're not brothers anymore and they're brother and sister, is their relationship going to change? And they're still just as close as ever, and really nothing changed in their relationship. I mean, it was just everything went on. So I think adults definitely have a harder time than youth.
Very true. Paria, in 1 minute, anything else that we haven't covered and you really want our audience to know?
I want your audience to, a lot of people don't know trans people. So part of sort of writing this book was like, get to know a family with a trans kid, get to know a trans young adult. I mean, sometimes when you read somebody's story, you feel like you know them. And so, so that was sort of part of why I wanted to write. But, just get to know a trans person, and that will really open your mind and shift how you think.
Beautiful. So thank you. And thank Ava for allowing that experience, your heartfelt experience and your life experience to be educating the rest of us in all the experience you've gone. Everyone, Dr. Paria Hassouri, the author of Found in Transition. And you can find Dr. Hassouri at Paria, Paria, Hassouri, HASSOURI.com. Thank you so much for being on the show. And it was a blessing and a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And we'll be together again next week. Bye-bye.
The Inner Voice Show is a dialogue between the host and the listeners about their relationships. This show is not an attempt to assess, diagnose, or treat any mental health or illness condition. Please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
Join the conversation every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific for Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Dr. Foojan is a radio and TV host, international speaker, psychotherapist, life coach, and the author of Life Reset, The Awareness Path to Create the Life You Want. She brings you the latest research and interviews with experts in the field of cognitive sciences. Anyone who loves to grow and create growth for humanity gets a voice on this call-in show. Inner Voice Heartfelt Chat with Dr. Foojan. Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Pacific on Smart Talk KMET 1490 AM and on KMET1490am.com.
Take KMET 1490 AM with you everywhere you go by downloading our free smartphone apps found on the KMET website, KMET1490am.com. You can also go to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store on your phone to download the free app. Now you can listen live or play any of your favorite programmers' podcasts using your smartphone. Don't miss out on the free KMET smartphone apps. Go to KMET1490am.com and download your free phone app today.
Check us out online at KMET1490am.com.
There's more to the water you drink than you think. It's structure that matters the most to your body. So Healthy is clean and pure and mineralized, but processed has lost the structure essential to water. It comes right back with the golden ratio. Your glassware is all it takes.